Welcome back to Fight Capital, where we step into the ring of combat sports business. I'm your host, Ryan Rappaport. Today, I'm honored to be joined by Mohammed, the Hawk Shahid. As the driving force behind KHK MMA and the president of Brave Combat Federation, he has been instrumental in the incredible growth of mixed martial arts in Bahrain, transforming it into a thriving hub for the sport. His journey from a fierce competitor in the ring to a visionary leader outside of it is a story of passion, dedication, and innovative thinking. Today, we'll explore how the Hawk is not just shaping the future of MMA in Bahrain, but also impacting the global sports landscape. Assalamu alaikum, Mohammed. Thank you for being here. How are you and where are you joining from today?
Alaikum salam, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me. I'm here in Bahrain. We have a busy 2 months to end 2023, so excited for that.
Yes, I know you're going to be in Spain on Saturday, which seems like it's shaping up to be an exciting event. I'm always interested because not a lot of promoters have actually been athletes in the space, but as someone who transitioned from being a mixed martial arts competitor to now being at the helm of Brave Combat Federation, how have your experience as a combat sports athlete shaped how you lead and manage both Brave Combat Federation and KHK MMA?
I think from the combat sports side or MMA, it's so much more easier because you understand the challenges and the issues of fighters, the industry itself, and I think mixed martial art athletes are slightly different from athletes from other sports because we as athletes have to learn the industry as much as any other promoter that's out there who's running the business as well. So you need to know the media side. You have to understand what is to have choose the right managers. You are always looking at ahead of time or in the future of post fighting career as well, whether for building a brand, building a gym. So you're always in that mental space while you're a fighter as well. That's a little bit different from when you have a 100-year-old sport where you're just put in the system and you feel like it's already existing, and I just have to be a good talent and I can be at the top of the game if I'm a good athlete. But in MMA, you have to find 20 different ways of when it comes to matchmaking, or talking to getting the right opponent for the fight, how you build yourself. So there's so much that goes on when you're an MMA athlete. And I think for the athletes from the early days, I mean, today it's more reformed, but when you're talking about 10 years back, 15 years back, athletes from those time, they are already entrepreneurs. And for me, there's been so much more easier being an athlete to understand the industry, that there's no better way to learn the industry than becoming an athlete myself, and I think that was my biggest lesson. But at the same time, the values that you learn while you're a combat sports athlete and mixed martial art athlete, I think those values is what I take to industries outside of mixed martial art today. While I'm a chairman of KHK Holding, where we are working on different industries and different sports at KHK Sports and the media side of things, I think the values that I learned as a martial artist, I think that is for me the highest value, more than any other education that I'm getting as I go forward and learn and do the business.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And I really enjoyed your podcast with Mohammed Makayev, where you talked about that evolution of him and how he's kind of grown into the business from an amateur talent to where he's at now, potentially fighting for a UFC championship sometime in the near future. But I would love for you to discuss the fostering of amateur talent in MMA and how such of the alliances that you've helped coordinate, like the IMMAF, has helped not just elevate Brave CF's promotion, but also the overall combat's ecosystem.
Absolutely. I think the amateur scene is the future of mixed martial art. We know that our sport was built upside down. We didn't have an amateur scene. We didn't have governing bodies. We jumped in straight into the professional side of the sport itself. And because of that, we don't see a lot of top promotions really focusing on the development of the sport as a priority of their business. And that's fine. I mean, it's ultimately a business. You're looking at your bottom line. You're looking at your year-ending balance sheet to be green or red. That is ultimately the focus. But this is where the birth of Brave Combat Federation comes in. Our core value was about sports development, reforming the sport of MMA from an event business to a sports business. That one day we could have those athletes like we just spoke about, who doesn't have to think about all those business things and leave it to their management and their team, and know that I am an 8, 9 year old kid who can just go to a gym and have this systematic progression model that's created by the industry itself, that I could go from gym to glory. And that's always been our focus. So today, having that amateur scene with International Mixed Martial Art Federation, what they have built in the past 10 years, it is definitely the future. And we're seeing that today from the top athletes coming out from that roster, but also from an MMA perspective. We've all been there from the watching UFCs and the day one MMA from Pride and UFCs and all that stuff, and we've seen that technical evolution in the sport where we have MMA guys didn't know what MMA was. It never existed. MMA was just a bunch of different martial arts competing against each other, and we always loved that idea of Muay Thai versus Jiu-Jitsu, with wrestling was judo, and eventually that we saw that we seen that change when wrestling came in, and sort, or even before wrestling, it was Jiu-Jitsu that came in and did the big eye opener, let's say, in mixed martial art, and then you saw wrestlers coming in, and then you saw the evolution of wrestlers understanding the submission artists understanding the wrestling aspect and the striking aspect, and then we are seeing that transition when you have this new sport like sambo come in, who's had so much more experience from a very young age, from their young age, where they do the striking, they do the wrestling, they do submissions, and it's much more mixed than individual martial arts. So then the question comes in. So we're seeing the domination of sambo athletes from the likes of Dagestan and Chechnya, but then what happens if we have that 8 and 9 year old kids coming from purely MMA? So they're doing everything that is within the rules. They're training mixed martial art all their life. What would we see that evolution? How would that look like? And I think that's what we're seeing with the likes of Makayevs and the up and coming athletes that's coming from this roster. And I think that is ultimately going to be that evolution of MMA, where we can say that you are an MMA fighter, and we don't have to really worry about what's his background or what's the martial that they come from, but they are purely MMA fighters. We still don't have that a lot in mixed martial art today. We still have athletes coming from some background, but then the likes of Mokaevs and Ramzan Gitinovs are the example of those mixed martial art athletes, and I'm really excited to see that for them to go out there and dominate the mixed martial art world and say that this is ultimately the final evolution. I wouldn't say that it stops, but at least from in terms of martial arts itself, you realize that this is what we've always been waiting for since 1993.
One of the things that have impressed me about your organization is how you foster that global talent as well. I mean, if just looking at all the other promotions in the world, it's arguably to say that after the UFC, Brave Combat Federation is maybe the most global, actually even more than the UFC, considering how many places you have been and how many different countries and localities you've been in. But now you're making your debut in Tenerife, Spain, this Saturday, November 18th. Can you just talk about the significance of that expansion into another new territory and how that aligns with your global vision?
Absolutely. I think there's different areas of where we want the sports to be in the next 50 years. I mean, the beginning of Brave Combat Federation, like I said, the core value was sports development, and we wanted the mixed martial art industry in all aspects. I mean, it's not just about the talent development, but also creating sustainable business model for mixed martial art as an industry around the world. I mean, that's what we wanted, where we want the sports to go, and that's the beginning of Brave Combat Federation. That's always been the foundation, the value of Brave. So one of the factors has been empowering a governing body, which is what you'll see us do with the International Mixed Martial Art Federation. How we are supporting them, how we are working together to make sure that we grow, you grow, we do this together, because that's where the future lies. But at the same time, it is also important for Brave to make sure that we travel around the world and go to countries where you see the talent. Some countries have the talent, some countries have the resources, but does not have the branding of mixed martial arts in that country, and you still want those countries to come on board because it adds a lot of value to the industry itself, and then you go there and do more of the education side. But then you have countries like Brazil where you don't need to educate them about mixed martial art, but their struggle is the economic side of things, where you don't see that kind of cash flow into mixed martial art industry, and you see all the big organizations taking a back step for the past 5 6 years, and which is where we say that now we are doubling down and making sure that we're going back into those countries and giving them the resources, or creating those resources in those countries. So what we're doing with globalization on the outside looks like Brave is traveling to a lot of countries, and yes, we have traveled to more countries than what UFC has done in 30 years, and Spain is going to be the 30th country that we're actually going to be hosted in the past 7 years. So that is a great achievement. But the significance of that achievement really is the idea that how we can bring the world together to work on one sustainable business model for mixed martial art. And it doesn't happen overnight. So when we go to a country, you'll notice that we work with local promotions. That's very important because they have spent years in developing the sport and did their part, uh, from sweat to money to everything else, the hard work they've put in to build the sport. So we have to go there and work together with them. Of course, Brave brings in the international value, brings in the sports values, as we say, where it is beyond mixed martial art, where when you bring mixed martial art or a Super Cup finals of one of the football leagues, the difference is people value that more because they feel like there's sports values there and not MMA, because MMA is just another event. But with the sports final matches, what they see is, oh, it's going to be a networking event. We're going to have celebrities come in. We're going to have businessmen come in. We're going to have government officials come in, governing body heads come in. So it's much more bigger than the sport, the event itself. They don't see that in mixed martial art very often, and because it is an event, it goes away and maybe comes back, does not come back. But there's no ecosystem that is built in the country. So we try to change that by going out there, working with the local organizations, bring the international value and the sports value onto the table to the country. And that, the byproduct of that is to have the nation's governing bodies, the government and the private sectors, to come on board and support mixed martial art. And you do that in as many countries as possible, and then they all start linking with each other because you have the same resources and behavior in all the countries, and they understand it better. And when they all link together and work together, and you have the security of a governing body in mixed martial art looking over everything, you will start seeing the shape of actual sports business or a sports industry in mixed martial art. Otherwise, we would be ending up doing great, massive events in different places, whether it's boxing or MMA. But it will be just an event model where today you will have two top fighters fight, or you could have two models fight, or two YouTubers fight, and it's all fine because it's an event business. But we don't see the sports value in it, and the people who are going to be suffering are passionate enthusiasts like yourselves, me, and the athletes, the managers. Everybody else is going to suffer on the long run, because we don't want to be like our big brother in boxing, that what we're seeing with them. And MMA is not far away from that happening. So this is, I think, that is one of the behind the scenes significance and values that a lot of people don't see in what Brave does. But ultimately, we've always been focused on that, and that's always been our uh, uh, priority in terms of where we want Brave to go and what Brave's positioning is is in the MMA world.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to the beauty of the sport, it being such a global phenomenon. And there's very little equipment you need to learn how to start participating in combat sports. So, for sure, that's a huge impact for what you're helping do to develop the sport and the global recognition as it being one of the fastest growing means of athletics in the world. But something else you just spoke to, which I thought was very important. You've been instrumental in fostering past partnerships with like major companies such as MTV, ESPN5, and most recently, like you were saying, with other promotions, Hexagon MMA. Can you just shed some light on the strategic significance of having these past partnerships and how they're influencing your current trajectory?
Definitely. I think Brave Combat Federation is blessed because our founder is His Highness Sheikh Khalid bin Hamad. And we are already, if you look at everything that we're trying to do as Brave for the MMA world, it's not just a group of MMA lovers that came in and said that, we need to change the MMA world and let's go and do something new, something that nobody has seen before. That's not the case. If you look at the backstory of Brave Combat Federation, who's behind Brave Combat Federation, there's a vast amount of experience and knowledge in the sports industry, from a national development of sports that we have from what we have done in Bahrain as a country, focused on national development of sport, but also at the governing positions, whether it's FIFA or whether it's in Olympic level, or Olympic committee level. So we understand the governing side. We understand hosting international events from F1 to Ironman, to name it. Also investing in teams, what the business of sports is, whether it's investing in football clubs like Paris FC or Cordoba CF, or the first Tour de France team behind Victorious. We've been in every aspect of the sport, and we're taking that knowledge of the sports industry as a whole, from hosting events to investment in business to the governance side, and we are bringing that to mixed martial art. That's something you will not see any of the mixed martial art organization, even the top ones, have in their back pocket. And that experience is something I think is the only way to bring into mixed martial art and put that on the table for the whole global MMA industry to really benefit from. So that's where we come from. And with that being said, for us to go and do a partnership on a television deal or into countries as well, we understand them better, not as mixed martial art, but as everything else. So when we go into a country like India or Africa or Central Asia, we've already had multiple relationships with them. We had sports relationships with them. We've been playing Asian championships with these countries. We know their governing bodies. We've been there and have spoken to the sports investors of those countries as well. So we do have a lot of experience outside of MMA, and we're just trying to get all those values that we have outside of MMA, and we're introducing to them this amazing project of what this beautiful sport of mixed martial art is, and trying to get them on board with this sport as well. So it's just so much more easier for us to make those relationships with the countries, broadcasting network, the governing bodies of those countries as well. And that's why we've been able to go at such a fast pace. And while we are going at such a fast pace, those values that we have is what we name it as sports values. We want to make sure that we give it back to the organizations that were not lucky enough to have those backing, but were passionate enough and had the strong mixed martial art heart, let's say, to build that sport, even if that does not bring them any money back. Even if we know the industry really well, a lot of people have been bleeding money. A lot of people have been doing this purely out of passion and love for the sport, and we want to give that back to them. So every country that we go to, we want to work with the promoters who have been building the sport for a long time, and we come in and we do the bigger picture, where it's globalizing, getting those international partners on board, giving them those international exposure through our broadcasting partners, but also on a national level to bring those national governing bodies who we have a relationship outside of mixed martial art, to invite them and show them what these local promotions has been doing for the past 5, 10, 15 years, and nobody has been paying them attention other than our MMA world. But outside of them, nobody has been paying them attention, and we want to bring that attention to them. And that's that's I think something very crucial in why we do this partnership, but also the benefit of that, because ultimately, if these local promotions are empowered and they get those values in their countries, they would be 10 times faster. There's no question about their ethics of work or hard work or passion for the sport. They have done it without anything. Imagine we bring them those values. What would they be doing with all those resources they get?
No, that's a amazing point too. Having that access to surely speaks to the roster of people that you brought in at KHK MMA. All that experience and that global network has been amazing. I don't think people outside or just the casual fan will understand the level of talent that not only you currently have at Brave CF, as well as what you've had at KHK as well. People like Islam Makachev, Khabib Nurmagomedov. We spoke about Muhammad Makayev, John Kavanagh. I mean, and I could just keep going down the roster of the current athletes you work with, and it's some of the best world champion wrestlers, sambo fighters. I mean, it's pretty amazing. Can you just talk to me a little bit about what makes KHK MMA so distinct, and how do you ensure it remains a beacon for these upcoming athletes?
Yeah, KHK MMA was a vision, and where Brave Combat Federation started. When we talk about the story of Brave itself, I always take them a step back and start with KHK MMA, because Brave Combat Federation starting a promotion and being part of the 7,000 other promotions that exist already was not the goal. Our goal was post development, and so at an initial stage, it was more of the testing. We were testing the water. So when we had the talents like Khabib, Islam, Frankie Edgar, Eldar, Hamza Koigi, Alex Soto, a lot of these guys, Shorty Torres, France Malambo, we brought all of them together. I think that was one of the early days where you see the Dagestani guys working with SBG together under one roof in a very friendly manner. But at those days, we're looking at these talents when nobody knew who Khabib was, nobody knew what the quality of Islam was. But these days, the idea was, what happens if we give them the right resources? We give them the resources similar to what a football athlete would get, an NFL athlete would get, or NBA or a cricket athlete would get. What would happen to these athletes if they were given that, treated like one of these mainstream sports athletes? Uh, and then we put that to a test. But it wasn't only the top athletes that we looked at who were already in UFC, like Khabib and Islam and Frankie Edgar, but was also guys who were in the professional level, like Eldar and Hamza Koigi, but also the guys who were just transitioning from amateur to professional side like France Malamba and Shorty Torres. Uh, but the fourth tier was for me the most important, which is the amateur level athletes who have not even started their career at that stage. So we put them into four different tiers, and we started giving them the right resources to see how would that result. And no question, Frankie Edgar, when everybody thought he was done and dusted, he came back up, and the opportunities that he got at that time was amazing. But Habib and Islam, I'm not going to even mention their achievements. But then you see the likes of Eldar Eldarov and Hamza Koiji, who's now the biggest bantamweight in the Middle East, and Eldar Eldarov, who's already a world champion, but has transitioned from becoming a world champion to becoming one of the most renowned coaches and coach slash manager for the KHK MMA team. But then the beauty was when you see the third and fourth tier, where you look at the fighters who are just turning pro and doing the pro debut, and you're seeing Shorty Torres becoming double champ at Titan FC, becoming a Brave CF champion today, and like similar to what James Gallagher became a superstar for Ireland, and France Malumbo is now one of the top guys in featherweight division, if I'm not mistaken, in PFL. Uh, the amateur team was also very special because they became the number one ranked team in the world for amateur IMMAF ranking, let's say. So we've seen the success at every different level. And then the question came in from His Highness was, how do we do this for everybody else in the world? But that was just 20 athletes. There's 20,000 in the world. How do we make sure that this platform or this opportunity is there? And the answer to that is, from my side, was more of, I don't think we could do this in this particular system that we exist in today, because we have to reform the system itself. You have to create a new system. You can't stay and compete with Nokia. You have to bring iPhone on the table, and that is the only way to do that. I mean, you could be the biggest brand. When you change the system, something new is coming on board that is going to reform the industry, that is made for everybody around the world, where you don't have to have the fighters come and call promoters like Shahid, Dana White, and guys, and call them and say, hey, can I get a fight? Please, I'm a great guy. Look at, and eventually reach to a point that if you don't speak English, if you're not good at trash talking, if you are not good at social media, you're not going to be able to get the pay or the opportunity like the ones who are actually good at it. And we understand the media value, absolutely, but that shouldn't be the highest priority. And without that, you shouldn't be losing your career. And that's the situation where we are in today. And we are to be blamed as the people who are leading the sports at the promotional level, as promoters, as company owners, and we are pushing that more to be the higher priority more than anything else. And this is where we need to change, and this is why we started Brave Combat Federation, to become the vision more than a promotion, and say that let's be within the industry that the MMA industry understands today. If we went out and created the governing body, created the franchise model, and changed everything from day one, nobody would give a damn about us. Let's say, they wouldn't even know what we're doing. They wouldn't even understand it. The MMA world wouldn't even understand it, because they don't understand the international sports, let's say, within the industry. So they wouldn't, they can't relate to it. So we had to be within the system and be there, do what we're doing today, and then introduce the new business model, the new structure for a global ecosystem. And that is where we are going. So today we are seeing that work really well, because even if we see the amount of talents that come from the International MMA Federation championships, whether it's World Championship, European Championship, Asian Championships, we see that development happening, but that wouldn't be seen if they were still in a kitchen doing their championships in Las Vegas, and nobody would even know that existed. I mean, we've seen this organization for the past 10 years, but if you see the difference since 2017 till today, how they have just blown out of the water and reached to the top, and what they've been doing today in terms of the number of countries being part of it, the number of athletes participating in the competition, it's massive. I think, for me, I've been part of a lot of world championships in other combat sports as well at an amateur level, and we've been associated with them even till today. But I've not seen a world championship as big as what the IMMAF World Championships looks like in terms of glamour, production, and everything else as well. And that adds a lot of value for a kid to come into a world championship and see this at the age of 14 and 15. And he looks at the magnitude of how big this is, and he's like, okay, for the rest of my life, this is what I want to do, if this is how big it is. But if he went for a world championship and he was fighting in an apartment, with a mini cage there, I don't think he would have a dream to be there for the rest of his life. And that little things matter a lot. A lot of people don't think of those areas, it's nuances, but those things matter as well. So we had to work together to fit all of those in, and today we are seeing the results. But it's just the beginning. That we said that it's a tip of the iceberg, because we're still in the event business model. We still have a long way to go in terms of converting this whole system, industry of mixed martial art, and turning it into a franchise business model. When that happens, and it's not far away, we have already started implementing those. In the next 5 years, you will actually see that day where you will see the MMA organizations that are today trying to create pay-per-views and big events and focusing on the business side, which is great, amazing, and we love it and keep doing it. But you will see one day that they're all going to be Nokia's, and what the vision of Brave and IMAF is going to be the Apple for the organization, for the industry itself.
Just to reinforce that point too, I had on a MMA amateur athlete who's having his pro debut and won an IMMAF championship, and that's one of the things he spoke to too. I mean, he's from Kingfisher, Oklahoma, on a reservation there, and never traveled very much, but here he is. He had the opportunity to go to Latin America to participate in the championships, and that gave him that global perspective that he may not have ever have had with that, or faced international competition. Now he's heading into his pro debut. His name is Gabe Rednose. That was one of the things that he stressed about IMMAF. And then I just think back to Shorty Torres, who I had on a couple months ago right after he won his championship, and spoke so highly to the access and the visibility he's getting with Brave. Whereas, a smaller weight class, those guys have trouble finding the right promotions and getting treated properly. And that's the other thing he accredited to your organization. But going back to that too, it's all about getting the eyes, right? And you've had some recent partnerships with major streaming platforms like Video in Indonesia, MX Player in India, Airtel in Africa. And that's not only positioned you as a global sport icon, but it's expanded that reach new audiences. Can you talk about the strategic importances there of advancing MMA's popularity, and how do you see them shaping that combat sports landscape of those diverse regions and those partnerships?
It's key. Those are very key partnerships, because if you look at the likes of Video in Indonesia, Airtel in Nigeria, Geo and MX Player in India, combined together, they're reaching over 1 billion unique users for their applications itself. So to give these billion users access to mixed martial arts stories, I think that is key for us. So as you said, I think having the right eyeballs is very important, and telling them the right stories of what mixed martial art is, and educating these casual fans. I mean, the hardcore fans know mixed martial art. They're going to consume this content regardless. But the idea is, what are you going to share with the casual fans of mixed martial art? I think this is the key point. So these partnerships are reaching to billions of uh, casual fans, and you're telling them the story of mixed martial art. You're telling them the story of a kid from Nepal who came to work as a butler in Middle East and turned out to be the first person to represent their flag in the world championship. And the person he was a butler for in his palace is behind him holding his water and towel for him. These stories are stories that will give hope to people, and that's something that we could be proud for than any other numbers that we see on our balance sheet. And there's millions and millions of stories that's out there, and we're not able to tell those stories. And the reason why we're not able to tell those stories is because, again, going back to our sport, when English speaking sport, and a lot of people that's outside of the English speaking sport are not getting the opportunity unless they start learning how to speak English, and that's when they get into the mainstream. We can't have a Lionel Messi in mixed martial art, where I don't know how he speaks. I have never listened to an interview of his, but I truly believe he's one of the best footballers, if not the best footballer in the world today. And does not go back to his marketing abilities, branding abilities, or his way of talking. Is just because of his talent. And how can we have that in mixed martial art? And these partnerships are going to be contributing to the athletes, rather than hoping that I'm not going to sit down and say that I need an athlete that can sell tickets, sell pay-per-views, and he should be really good at trash talking. And I've been working with a lot of promotions, doing co-promotions with a lot of organizations around the world. And one thing, because we are in this MMA system, we naturally develop this mentality, business mentality, where we are like, listen, I see these two guys fighting, but can we make sure that these guys are not going to wrestle and hug each other and be on the cage and on the ground? I mean, we want to see, the fans want to see some people, standing up and, banging each other. We want to see that. But the thing I say is, I understand that purely from a promoter's perspective. I truly understand. I love to watch two strikers go at it. We all love it, and that's amazing. But let that not take away from finding out who's the best fighter. I mean, isn't that what we all started falling in love with mixed martial art for? When we had a guy who had one hand with the boxing gloves and the other was bare knuckle, and coming and fighting with another guy who was wearing a jiu-jitsu gi. I mean, this is what we loved. We wanted to see, is taekwondo as good as Muay Thai? What happens if a Muay Thai guy throws leg kicks at the taekwondo guy who's hopping around? We loved that. That was the foundation of the sport, to find out who's the best fighter in the world. And today, I love, again, I'm not going against the media requirements or the media part of the industry, but not sacrificing the sports element. And this is the situation. So with these partnerships with MX Player Video, Airtel, what we've done in 2023, we are reaching to a mass audience that we can tell these stories to, build hope in the 14, 15-year-old kids who are watching and saying that I want to be that individual. I don't have to worry about becoming a Conor McGregor or becoming an athlete who has to be that outspoken. I can be if I have the talent, and that's all that matters. So I think these partnerships are great in terms of making Brave Combat Federation a media giant today. I think nobody has been. We've achieved something that the whole Middle East have in their sports industry has never achieved before, in terms of having an organization founded in the Middle East and being exported at this magnitude around the world. We've always been great at importing sports and making sure that we build a structure within the region, but this is the first time we're seeing an organization being exported at this level. So for us in the Middle East, they look at us and say, wow, that's a Middle Eastern organization doing this. But we always say, as Brave, we're a global organization, because this is the same thing that we're doing for Southeast Asia. South Asia, we are a South Asian promotion. We've never seen a population as big as India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Sri Lanka combined together have the opportunity to take their athletes, their sports, and export it. And we are doing that for them. We're doing the same thing for South America. If Brave International Combat Week in South America hosted the first Pan American Championship, and that's the byproduct of doing events in those countries, like we discussed earlier, and creating the sports values. And then when you see the private sector and the government bodies coming to support mixed martial art, you will see the bigger picture of creating Pan American Championships. And then when the Pan American Championship starts coming in and those kind of athletes starts being built, what's going to happen next is much more bigger than that. So it's a step by step process, but it starts from someone being brave enough to go to these countries and say that we're going to take that first step regardless of having any data of numbers, valuation, sponsorship price, ticket sales, none of that. We're going to go there. Why? Because your priority is sports development. Everything else comes second in line.
Oh, and I can speak to that personally. I am a MMA nerd, as I like to tell myself. And you actually was Brave who put Johnny Walker on my radar back in, I think it was like 2017, when
Right.
that event you had in Brazil. And that just speaks to, hey, these are the people, but it's that international reach that's bringing in that talent and bringing it to a worldwide stage. But one of the things that's also impressed me is you are investing in not just MMA in Bahrain, but also in the spectacle of it. And I know you're going to be hosting 3 events in East of Town in December. Can you just shed some light on the significance of the location for Brave being back in Bahrain and its combatants?
Firstly, it's it's a very emotional events in December, because there's a lot of significance and a lot of storyline behind it. One, if you look at 7 years back, and you look at Middle East, there we used to have MMA organizations. We did have MMA promotions. We did have MMA fighters. Some of the top MMA fighters. They were all. We did have the sport in the region. It was not new, but we really didn't see it reach the world. We haven't seen someone take the sport on their shoulder and say that we're going to develop the sport in this whole region and take these athletes to become international stars. And we've not really seen that. And whatever the reason might be, we don't know. We love the Muhammad Alis and the Mike Tysons, and we used to follow boxing from very long time, but we never had international boxing events. We didn't have the combat sports move into our region. It was always the big sports, whereas football, horse racing, golf, F1, and whatever the reason might be, because of that, maybe it could have been considered as a taboo. But then we had His Highness Sheikh Khalid, who came out and, like I said, do that first thing, and that's a behavior you will see in Brave till today, that we go to a country regardless of any other data and be brave enough to jump in there. And His Highness was the person who put the face to combat sports and said that this is Brave Combat Federation, this is KHK MMA, this is some top fighters from a place called Dagestan in Russia, which nobody in the Middle East knew about. And he bought Khabibs and Islams and Makayevs at the age of 15. We scouted him, so all this started with one person putting his face and saying that I'm going to carry the sport on his shoulder. And today, after 7, 8 years, you're looking at it and you're saying that this is the new hub for combat sports. The biggest boxing events are happening. The biggest UFC events are happening there. Every organization wants to come here and need a piece of this region, and that's amazing. That's amazing to see that, and for us to always come back and see the success that we've had in 2023, from broadcasting deals, digital deals, to partnering with the international organization, to becoming the most global organization by breaking the records of being hosted in the most amount of countries. All of this happening in 2023. I think it is very important to come back and do that event in Bahrain, and not just do one event, because it's so much to tell. So that's why we had to do 3 events in the country, and hopefully that's enough. But also during this time, host the first Asian championship. To develop, I think Asia is one of the most important continents for the future of mixed martial art as well. So having that Asian championship for the first time hosted in Bahrain with 3 events, it is very interesting. And then each event has its own story, from Brave 77 that's happening in December 5th, when Kubanic is taking on how did I forget the title fight?
So many.
Lucas Martins, of course. Kubanic
Yeah.
taking on Lucas Martins. That has a huge story behind it. Likewise, when you look at Brave 79 on December 8th, you mentioned Johnny Walker. We mentioned Khabib's, Islam's, Frankie Edgar, Franz Ngannou, Gamzat Chimaev, Benoit Santini, Makayev, Shorty Torres. Imagine you have a card that you say that, imagine all these guys fought in one card in the previous Brave events. That would be amazing. But Brave 79 for me is that card where you're going to see the future Gamzat Chimaevs and the Johnny Walkers and the Benoit Santinis and Ilia Tapurias all in one card, where from the get-go, from Mahsen starting the fight, who's the number one, not number one, the greatest in the history of Wushu Sanda, in the sports history, is the one that's starting the card. So that just shows the quality going up the card, all the way to the return of Tahar Hadbi to fight against Ismail Nuruddin on a, like we said, a fan favorite striking clinic. But then you have Ramzan Gitinov fighting on that, who's the number one pound for pound amateur fighter in the history of MMA, the most decorated athlete. And then you have Rasul, who's the combat sambo world champion, beat Snyder in the wrestling world and become world champion at amateur level. He's going to be on the same card. And then the 2.0, Gamzat Chimaev 2.0, Gamzat Maev is also going to be on that same card. So we have all these guys lined up to fight in one card, which I feel like all of these guys are the future of mixed martial art, and it's beautiful to see them all fight in that same card. And ultimately, we go back to the finale, which is December 15th, with Shorty Torres and Nkosi making that part 2 fight an amazing. For me, it's amazing that we could make it in this year. We're always looking at 2024 to push it to 2024, but we've had a lot of pressure from a lot of people in terms of making that happen as soon as possible. And then we have the likes of Hamza Kohijis, Ezzeddin Darbanis, and Gamzats, who are waiting for that title shot. So we had to finish the story in 2023, and there's no better way to do it than on December 15th, followed by the last dance, which we call it as, where we have all this community. Before Brave event, there's been a lot of Middle Eastern athletes that has been struggling, working hard, and passionately dedicating their lives to mixed martial art. And when Brave came in, they got the opportunity to blossom and go around the world and showcase their talents. And it's so good to see that community back again, doing that one last combined event where they all can come together and fight in Brave against UK and Ireland talents. And that's going to be a Middle Eastern Arab legends versus UK and Ireland. So that's going to be an interesting one. And ending that with the title fight of Nkosi and Shorty, I think that's going to be an amazing card. So it's just 3 events, all of them having their own stories, and a lot of excitement into it. And in between that, you're going to have the first Asian championship as well. So fun, interesting, and hectic week.
Well, and it really speaks to His Highness Khalid bin Ahmad and his vision, because it definitely is. It was probably taboo back in 2015, 2016, when he's approaching this and saying that he wants to take on that role, as royalty, and investing himself and his public image in that. It's quite the leap. But I've had people like a friend, Will Harris, from Anatomy of a Fighter, who's fully invested in the Middle East and Asia in terms of the quality of talent, the stories that need to be told. I mean, he's not even looking to to do fight week stuff anymore. He's just talking about the talent, whether it's boxing, MMA, wrestling, that's coming out of the region. And it's been impressive for me to watch. And as a fan too, being able to see the level of talent like Rasul when he beat Kyle Snyder. Kyle Snyder is arguably one of the greatest American wrestlers of all time. And having someone like that type of talent in your division is quite amazing and very cool to see. But I will say I'm incredibly grateful for you taking some time out of your busy schedule to do this, because quite a fan of the organization, seeing it moving forward, and really excited to see what you do next.
Thank you, Ryan. It's a pleasure to be here, and it was great to have a chat with you, and hopefully we'll see you in Bahrain for the Brave event.
That would be wonderful. Thank you so much for doing this.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.